Hey guys, so we've got a few different vehicles here with different engines and drivetrains, and we thought this would be a great opportunity to kind of give you a rundown and explain how we go about engine selection as we talk to our customers. So we've got a carbureted small block in a 38 Chevrolet, we've got a big block Cadillac, we've got two LSs here, one 5.3 and one LS3, which is 6.2. So a little bit of variation between carb, EFI, LS, big block, small block. So we're going to take a few minutes just to go through those pros and cons, differences, and why we choose what engine, EFI setup, carb setup, based on the customer's needs. All right, we're going to start out first with this 1983 Jeep Scrambler. A lot of you know, based on our previous videos, this is a full build for us, and we have a lot of time and effort in this. We talked to the customer, obviously, before we started anything to kind of get an idea, hey, what are your expectations? What do you want to do with this thing? How do you want to drive it? What kind of power do you want? Etc. The owner of this thing is planning on driving this almost as a daily driver. So obviously for that, we want to do fuel injection, and then we wanted to do an LS. So here we have a 5.3, it's bone stock. We dressed it up to make it look a little better, but it just has a small Texas Speed cam. We changed the springs, the push rods, etc. But this is going to be a great combination for this thing daily driver. It's going to start up, it's going to run. The cooling efficiency on these LSs is really great, so you don't have to put a whole lot of fan in them. You don't have to do a lot to keep them cool if you're sitting in traffic, going through a drive-through, that kind of thing. We're going to be running things such as power steering. We've got AC on this Joker, so there's a ton of aftermarket front serpentine setups for this, where you can get all of that as one. So this particular setup is a vintage air front runner. We use a lot of those. They work really good. They look really good. But yeah, the 5.3 setup with a 4L60E, that's a 4-speed overdrive automatic transmission, and we've got it hooked to an Atlas transfer case. 410 gear ratio on this. We could get away with a little bit lower gear, so higher numerical, just because we're running taller tires. These are 33 1250s. But this combination for what he wants to do is going to be great. It's got a very small cam, works with a factory stall converter. It's going to have great street characteristics. Will be just a killer combination. This thing doesn't weigh a whole lot. The 410 gear overdrive, it's just going to be great. Daily driving this, the EFI is going to be nice to kind of keep the fuel efficiency where it needs to be. You don't have to choke it when you start it. You don't have to pump the gas. You hit the switch on this thing, the fuel pump primes it, and it's ready to go. So you can't beat these 5.3s. We're in all kinds of trucks. They've been in the thousands and thousands of cars, and they've kind of stood the test of time. But Gen 3 5.3, we're powering it by a Holley Terminator X Max. It's going to be a great combination that this guy can enjoy 365 days of the year. Cold, hot, it doesn't matter. This motor's going to start up and run fine regardless, and have pretty good power, especially the weight of this Jeep is pretty light. But that's why we went with this selection, with him saying, hey, I want a daily driver or something that has the capability where I can drive this thing every day, get decent fuel mileage, not have to worry about it getting hot. So here it is, 5.3 Gen 3 LS with a small cam, 4L60E overdrive. Great combination for a daily driver. Okay, here we are at car number 2. So this is a little different. It's a 49 Ford, but as you can see, it has a big block Cadillac engine. So it's a 472. These Cadillac motors were torque monsters. So 472 and 500, they were built from probably the late 60s to the mid 70s. Obviously, you hear there's no replacement for displacement. This has plenty of that. This car came in with the 472 in it. It was carbureted, and the owner is not going to drive this every day, but they wanted it to be dependable, have fuel injection, and be able to start up, not choke it, whether it be 30 degrees outside or 90 degrees outside. So we went with the Holley Sniper fuel injection on this thing. We didn't run the timing control. We just used a regular style distributor where we set the timing ourselves, but the throttle body is controlling all the air fuel and whatnot. This thing, again, is more going to be a weekend cruiser. Not so worried about the fuel mileage of this thing, more of a hot rod. It's got a pretty nasty little motor. Again, those big blocks are, like I said, there's a lot of motor there, a lot of rotating assembly, a lot of torque, and they make pretty decent power as well, especially for something of this weight. It's going to move this car along fine. But this thing, again, we just did the Holley EFI on it to just make it start up and run a little better. And the owner just wanted to keep it as is because it's just going to be a weekend cruiser, something he can get out and play around with. It'll smoke the tires if you want to here and there. It has great throttle response with that Holley Sniper. And this thing even doesn't have an overdrive transmission, but it does have a quick change rear end. For you that don't know, you can swap the gears in those and you can change the gear ratio kind of on the fly, essentially, where it's a lot harder to do than changing the transmission or changing the ring gear and pinion on a traditional rear end. So this is more of a hot rod, weekend cruiser. Wanted to add the EFI just for startup, no choking, no pumping the gas, all that kind of thing, just make it a little bit easier to drive. Again, big block Cadillac, older motor. Obviously the technology here is from the 60s and 70s. These motors sometimes are a little bit harder to keep cool. We have a new radiator we had built for it, shroud and electric fan, and so far this thing has been staying cool very nicely, but that is another concern on some of the traditional older small blocks and big blocks. They do have some cooling efficiency issues if you don't have enough radiator, enough airflow, etc. But this thing will be a great weekend cruiser, have plenty of power to go play around with, and then also have the EFI capability where it can start up and run without choking it. So there's car number 2, traditional big block with a fuel injection. All right, this brings us to car number 3, 38 Chevrolet Coupe. We've been building this. It's a full build. We've had this thing for a while, and here it is, almost finished, turned out really good. So this actually has a carbureted small block Chevrolet. This is a Blueprint Engines 350, makes around 350 horsepower with a Holley 4160 style carburetor, 4-barrel. It's a 600 CFM carburetor. So the owner of this car we talked to initially, right? And it's gonna be, again, kind of a weekend cruiser, drive it to shows, drive it to events, put in a parade here and there kind of thing, but not something that he was looking to have as a daily driver style vehicle. It's hard to beat a small block, with the LSs out now, there's a lot of people pulling these out and replacing them. But man, these small blocks have been tried and true. They've been put in vehicles from, the 50s to the 90s, right? And kind of stood the test of time there. But he just wanted something simple, something that was easy. If he had to pump the gas every now and then, it's okay. He's not really gonna be driving this thing in weather that's really cool, so probably under like 50 degrees. It's probably gonna stay in the garage. So the EFI wasn't as important in that aspect. This carburetor, once we get it tuned and everything, the carburetor and the timing, this thing should start and run like a dream. Small cam in this thing, small converter, got a 700 R4 transmission, which is also a 4-speed automatic overdrive, and then we put a 350 gear in the rear end. So this should be a great cruiser based on the weight of these these late 30s cars. They're pretty light, so plenty of power with the gear ratio to get this thing down the road, just plenty fast as you want to go. But again, this motor we dressed up a little bit, tried to tuck and hide some things. It's got some ultimate headers, but be a great little combination that will last and run for years in this setting. So again, these small blocks sometimes have some cooling issues if you don't have enough fan and radiator. This thing's got plenty of radiator. We put a shroud and a good size electric fan with a big motor on it. So far this thing has not gotten hot, even tried to get hot. Once we start driving around different scenarios and situations, we'll see how it does with different loads. But this is a tried and true combination. A small block Chevrolet with a carburetor, overdrive automatic, that will get you anywhere you need to go. It kind of helps too on the cost side, where the LSs and the fuel injections tend to be a little more expensive. This is just, there's no electric fuel pump. We're running this with a mechanical fuel pump. Low pressure fuel system. I mean, it's pretty, I guess, basic in that sense, but it works out well, and it has worked out well for many years. And for what this customer is gonna do with this car, it's gonna be a great combination that he can get in and drive to whatever show he wants to. Very simple, but really gets the job done for this application. All right, and this brings us to our last vehicle, which is somewhat similar to the Jeep, but also different in a sense. So 72 C10, killer little truck. This also has an LS. It's a Gen 4 LS3, so a little bit of difference. If you don't know the LS is, that's a cast iron block 5.3 that you saw in the Jeep, so it's a lot smaller displacement. This is an all aluminum 6.2 liter. Different heads. This thing's got a pretty good little cam in it, hits a good lick. This is more of a show truck where they're not going to be driving it every day. It's going to be more, again, kind of like the 38 was. It's going to be, we're going to go to cruise-ins, we're going to go to car shows, we'll cruise around some on the weekends and whatnot, but they wanted the capability of an LS and the dependability that if they wanted to drive this thing across the country, just get in and take off. So cammed LS3, again, you can see we've got a vintage air front runner on this. We've got plenty of radiator, dual fans. This thing should never get hot ever. And it's backed by a 6L80 transmission, which is a 6-speed overdrive automatic. Again, the overdrive in all these transmissions really helps keep those RPMs down, especially on the interstate. LS, this has actually got the factory fuel injection, which is a little different from the one in the Jeep, which you saw we had an aftermarket intake. Fuel rails, injectors, so forth. You can see here, this plastic intake, the fuel rails, they're all GM stuff. So instead of powering this with a Holley, this actually has a standalone from SpearTech that runs with the factory GM PCM. This thing is gonna be great. It's gonna make really good power. Multi-port fuel injection. The cooling system is super efficient. The engine itself is efficient. So as far as fuel mileage, if that's something you're concerned with, the only downfall on the LS stuff when you're converting, especially from a first-gen carbureted engine, or an older carbureted engine, would be just the cost, because you're gonna have to change over your entire fuel system. We do a drop-in fuel pump, new tank, AN fittings, you got the filter, the regulator, all the lines, the electronic side of it with either a standalone that works with a GM PCM or a Holley EFI type deal. But these 6.2s, the LS3s, are killer combinations. It's probably my favorite LS that we've dealt with. Just make good power, they're super dependable, and they're just good running little motors that are efficient and will get you where we need to go. So. That rounds it up. Again, we had the Jeep with the 5.3, it was Gen 3 LS cast iron block, small cam with a 4L60E automatic overdrive. We had the 49 Ford with a big block Cadillac 472 with Holley EFI. We had the 38 Chevrolet with a Blueprint Engines 350 small block with a carburetor. And then we've got this, which is a 72 C10 LS3 small cam 6L80E transmission. So hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of the pros and cons of some, why we go about working with customers and choosing what needs to go and what based on their needs, so that we're spending money most effectively and they get the results that they want when it's all said and done. So again, if you like what you see, please like and subscribe. Check us out. We'll have more content, and hopefully you can go pick you out the powertrain or drivetrain for your next vehicle.